We've already heard a mention of a burning man. Bethany Winslow, Bethany, the virtual version in Second Life, will discuss virtual worlds as makerspaces with this presentation, Burning Man in Cyberspace, Makerspaces and Communities of Practice in Virtual Worlds. So Bethany, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Can you guys all hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much for allowing me to present at VCARA, the 10th anniversary. I'm very excited. My name is Bethany Winslow, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm an instructional designer with eCampus at San Jose State University. And this is my first time using the, let's see, make sure this HUD work. Let's see, there we go, excellent. So I support faculty to help them integrate educational technology with their curriculum, so it's important that I continually explore new technologies and model how to embrace the challenges that come with that. And we all know that there's a lot of challenges. But I really think virtual worlds offer incredible opportunities for collaborative learning, and I'd really like to help pave the way to get some more adoption and awareness of virtual worlds. I'm going to kind of see if my HUD here is working. Okay, there we go. Okay, click it again. Sorry, I'm trying to be attentive to both of these. But I find a lot of educators are actually not really aware of what we're doing here in virtual worlds. And there's kind of a couple of common denominators. I'm going to click through to the next slide here. And so I really want to help kind of close this gap that I'm seeing. But there's really two concepts, and it's makerspace and communities of practice. And when we consider the definitions, I think it's pretty obvious the common denominator is a shared culture of collaboration. It's empowered by sharing. And I think of makerspaces and communities of practice. I mean, these two concepts are conveying the idea that we're greater than the sum of our parts when we work collaboratively. Also, I think it's very much about empowering individuals and kind of, promoting the agency of individual participants. But at the bottom line is that being part of a makerspace or a community of practice is really not a spectator sport. So hopefully it makes sense here that I'm using Google Dictionary and Wikipedia for these definitions here, because these represent a crowdsourcing of knowledge and information sharing that I think is part of the theme here that I'm talking about. The world of education has traditionally been kind of the opposite of open or decentralized or crowdsourced, but libraries for me really represent accessibility and openness. And so I just want to tell you that's one of the reasons I got excited to get involved with the Community Virtual Library. So I want to tell you a little bit about the Hypergrid Resources Library that I'm working on here. And I have to catch up with this HUD in chat. I'm so sorry. It's hard to do two things at once. So, but let's move forward here that we're crowdsourcing knowledge and whatnot. And this kind of dovetails into what Val mentioned about us not wanting to reinvent the wheel. But the Hypergrid Resources Library, and I hope I'm not going too fast because I'm kind of clicking through this HUD really fast because I realized I was dilly-dallying a little bit. So I appreciate you guys bearing with me, but I want to make sure it's easy for people to kind of read. Thank you very much, Marie. Okay. So the Hypergrid Resources project, we have a mission to help people who are new to virtual worlds beyond Second Life to be able to get connected to information and also to the rich global communities of practice that are developing in the OpenZim metaverse and in other virtual worlds. And our portals will connect to persistent virtual locations that are education oriented. And they'll help, we hope, educators, librarians, and others to more easily navigate hypergrid enabled virtual worlds that are built on the OpenSim platform. Hypergridding is just the protocol that lets us teleport from grid to grid that are hosted on different servers. So we have several different goals for our centers, and some are long-term, and some of these goals are short-term. And I want to go ahead and show you on this next slide. Really, this is about leverage and sustainability. I'm going to kind of pan over and make sure this is looking correctly. Are we talking about, yes, leverage and sustainability. So this is a short-term goal. We want to connect our centers. We've got 2 different libraries. We want to connect them to different grids and also make it easy for newbies to understand what hypergridding is, because it's honestly really confusing. And we also have to think of this leverage and sustainability as a concept as we do this. Because, you know, one of our challenges is that there's no central location or authority on hypergridding. There's lots of organizations, there's communities, there's people who've, you know, have explored and gone before us, but everybody has their own website or blog, and there's, you know, their own angle on things. And this slide just shows a partial list of just some of the players in virtual worlds in terms of providing information in multiple locations in world. It just didn't make sense to create a bunch of in-world note cards that could get outdated easily. You know, so I chose to create a Wikiversity presence in the hopes that over time, our community might come to see the benefit of actually working together and writing to kind of create that knowledge. You know, we have 6 short articles in here that are on the screenshot here, and these web articles aren't owned by me or CVL. Anybody can contribute and improve them. The articles are deliberately brief, and they cover just the essentials for a newbie. So the article topics are just, you know, what is hypergridding? What is a grid? What is a region? You know, the challenges to hypergridding, etc. And so these are just, there's six short articles. Now, these 6 short articles, they're on the ground floor of our resource center because those are really just the most important things to read. But we also have basic background information along with an image that helps to illustrate the main concept. So the image on the top left here illustrates the challenges to hypergridding in that, you know, you can get confused by seeing the same content in more than one virtual world location. So it can be really hard to keep grids straight. The second information image on the top right here that directs people to the second floor of the center is where you'd get information like additional readings. So those web pages will have links to all those different blogs and people's websites. And again, all these pages are being built out on the Wikiversity platform. So there's only one place to edit or refine this information, but it can be kept up to date in multiple locations. And to introduce our resource center, we just held a poker run in the Virtual World's Best Practices in Education conference 2 weeks ago, and participants hypergridded between 2 resource centers and walked around to explore, you know, the information that's there, and collected poker cards from the tables spread out in both locations. And people emailed me the screenshots of their hands, and the highest hands just won a digital collage that I had hanging up in the resource center. It was a really great engagement device, but I just have to tell you guys, I don't think ever again I want to ever create so many objects where I have to double check the permissions and whatnot, because it was a real learning experience. So let me just click here to move forward. I have to pan over a little bit. Bear with me for a second. Thanks. So our longer term goals, you know, I mentioned using Wikiversity because we're really thinking long-term sustainability. Let's get this HUD to catch up here. But so we definitely want to add more portals, of course, and we need to add more Wikiversity pages. And it's really essential that we we really embrace this idea of crowdsourcing. You know, where should our future portals connect to, and how should we organize them as they grow? Another long-term goal we have is like a GitHub repository of Creative Commons shared OER files that can help others to efficiently build and modify their own virtual worlds. And it's going to take real librarianship, perhaps a modified model of librarianship, to catalog and manage what is essentially a collaboratively created database. So I think we envision helping people to access, modify, and ultimately give back new OER files to the library for others to build upon. So this brings me to the connection to Burning Man. I was part of a very successful theme camp that 12 of us brought out to the playa about 15 years ago. And when I started exploring virtual worlds, and even more so when I got involved in the educational side of it, I repeatedly found myself telling everyone around me what was happening in virtual worlds is exactly what I found at Burning Man all those years ago. What we are doing here is in perfect alignment with these 10 principles. So I've been sort of developing this as a theme in the back of my mind, that virtual worlds are Burning Man, but it was only in putting together this presentation that I discovered the connection is real, and I can't say that I'm surprised. Philip Rosdale hadn't even come up with the name Second Life yet when he went to Burning Man in 1999. He just wanted to build things, and he hadn't even given a thought as to what kind of culture would emerge in virtual worlds. But he went to Burning Man and he had a real epiphany, and he says the two communities have evolved similarly over the years. The playful inclusiveness and the dedication to the arts are just two similarities. But back in 2007, Rosedale perfectly described this cultural connection when he told Rolling Stone magazine that Burning Man is wondrously purposeless. It asks you not to have a reason to be there. You're brought together by a need to protect each other in the harsh environment. Second Life is a new, scary, difficult environment. People are brought together by their desire to help each other and to get through it at the beginning. Burning Man is Second Life. So there's many challenges for wider adoption, but what I'm trying to do is to increase awareness about virtual worlds being used in education by promoting what we're doing at real world events. I find most people have no idea that these worlds even exist. And then of course there's the learning curve. So I'm doing a couple of things. First, I'm developing a poster for a CSU Makerspace convening at Sonoma State at the end of May that I will showcase some examples of San Jose State using virtual worlds. Of course, I'll be talking about the Hypergrid Resources Center, but I'm also excited to talk about maybe an art gallery and museum building that we have there on Kitely. And I've got someone who teaches journalism and visual communications, and I'd like to recreate an exhibit he had in the King Library last year that commemorated Martin Luther King, or create an exhibit for one of his upcoming projects. Secondly, of course, I'll want to mention VCARA's 10-year presence in Second Life. In particular, I want to share some screenshots from the recent immersive learning tour that we had through the Archivium. I think that's incredibly, really something educators need to see. I'll also be talking about James Morgan from the Department of Art and Art History, who teaches digital media art. James has his students design and build sculptures in Minecraft and then 3D print them in the King Library. So that brings me to, what we're trying to do for, the long term. I'm planning on attending the Online Learning Consortium conference in November, which is one of the biggest and best known conferences for online teaching and learning. I saw a ton of stuff last year about AR and VR and absolutely nothing about virtual worlds and working together in community. And finally, my supervisor and director of eCampus, Jennifer Red, wants me to create a little standalone self-paced course that would introduce someone to what virtual worlds are in contrast to AR and VR. And the follow-up to that would, of be an immersive one where I host adventure outings or something in Second Life to get people acclimated. That's a longer term project, but one I certainly hope to see through. So that wraps up my my presentation here on what I'm kind of doing to be involved and try and help grow our community of practice in virtual worlds. And I'm cognizant of the time, so I'm sure we don't have time, but I'd love to connect with any of you. So thank you so much.